We cannot overemphasize the importance of conducting our research, unearthing our past, writing our history, and publishing our work to be enjoyed by all, and of course, renewing it with vigor and understanding. Now, this exercise defines a nation that is truly maturing and coming into its own. A very warm welcome to our heritage. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. This week, we featured a launch of Dr. Dan Carter's latest book. His friend and colleague, historian Bobby Morris, was present for the launch. And as expected, he placed things in their true perspective and shared some biographical data about the author. So, exactly what did Dr. Carter do in researching this book, Mr. Morris?
He took two institutions. First of all, the Vestry, which is a local government institution, and then the educational system. He used those documents. I can vouch for the fact that he had to be in the archives all the time. He had to be in the archives because all this material here is archival material. And he had to mine the archival material for material that he would then transform into history, which is what he has done, and he's done very well. I'm very proud of my friend. So I will tell you some more about him. He was born in Barbados in 1946. Not a bad year. The one after that was a little better because it was further away from the war. He was educated at Providence Boys and later at the Christchurch High School, where he completed his secondary education. He joined the teaching profession in 1965 as an assistant teacher at St. Giles Primary. He also taught at Christchurch Boys Primary, now the Milton Lynch Primary. He taught at St. Lawrence Primary and Luther Thorne Primary before being promoted to being the principal of St. Mark's Primary in 1984. He worked through the system. There was no gift. He was promoted because people could see his qualities. He then went on to St. Matthias Primary in 1993. This educator subsequently joined the Ministry of Education as an education officer, and he retired as a senior education officer in 2007. And apparently he returned to work. Dr. Carter completed a 2-year professional certificate in teacher education at Egerton Teachers Training College before going on to the University of the West Indies, Cayfield, where he pursued a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1976, followed by a certificate in educational management and administration in 1984, a master's in philosophy 1997, and he crowned that all with a doctorate of philosophy in 2007. The trained educator has written widely on historical development in education in Barbados. Many of his articles have been published in the Outlook, a magazine of the Barbados Union of Teachers, the Barbados Advocate, the Daily Nation, and the Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. Dr. Carter contributed a chapter on education in 50, The Barbados Legacy, a commemorative magazine celebrating 50 years of Barbados independence. He is the author of Lawrence T. Gay, The Educator, 1894 to 1982, 2005, The Story of Society Primary School, 1795 to 2006, The First Elementary School for Blacks in Barbados, 2008, A Short History of the Ministry of Education of Barbados, 2012, A History of Early Childhood Education in Barbados, The Barbadian Experience, 2016, and Empowering the Disabled, A Brief History of Special Education in Barbados, 2017. But I also have to point to a number of journal articles that you will not see on the back of this book. All of that you get for free when you buy the book, that information I just shared you. But I remember reading, I think it was 1993 or 1994. I was looking at the Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, and I saw 2 articles on the history and development of education in Barbados, co-authored by Dan Carter and Ralph Jemmett. And I consider them to be 2 brilliant men. Give me a clap for that. I'm right. And I enjoy those articles so much. And all teachers should read and understand how the educational system developed in Barbados. All the stages, all the various Bree report, all the different reports are captured by these gentlemen in that chronological history of education. But I'll tell you this. I've always found Dan to be a man of tremendous integrity. And when I say integrity, I'm talking about character. He was well raised. He will not stand for foolishness and wrongdoing. I know the man. And in that, I close my introduction to this gentleman and look forward to his next venture, because I know he'll be coming again.
Oh yes, Mr. Morris, we do look forward to that. But before we speak of his next venture, let us understand why the role of the Vestry system in education became the subject of his book.
Now, you want to know why I decided to write on the Vestry system of Barbados. In pursuing a lot of the documents, the reports in the ministry, I found that there was a lot of reference to the Vestry system and the schools. But before that, though, I live in Thornbury Hill, not very far from Oistins. So when I visit Oistins as a youngster, I would see this big, massive, old building called the Arms House, where the infirm would go. And somehow in my mind, I associate that building with the Vestry system. And many of you are not as old as I am, but you will know that in the days of donkey carts and bicycles, you had to go to the Vestry to get the license and all that. But I never associated the Vestry at that time with education in schools. It is only when I started to look at some ministry documents that I realized that the Vestry must have played some role in education, and that started my inquiry into the whole Vestry system and education, and thus the book tonight, The Role of the Vestry System in the Early Educational Development of Barbados. Now, I'll divide my short presentation into 3 parts. First, the early supervision of education. Secondly, the Vestry's impact on secondary education. And lastly, Vestry scholarships. Now, a little background to the Vestry system. Many of you will not be as aged as I am, but so you will hardly know about the Vestry. As is widely known, the Vestry system constituted the first form of local government in Barbados, commencing around 1629. According to Sir John Maud, under the common and canon law, the Vestry was an inevitable concomitant of the parish and the church. And as the parishes were established, so the Vestries came along, so that in every parish in Barbados, you had the Vestry. It was not, however, until 1680 that was made mandatory for the rector to be chairman of the vestry. So here is the strong link between education and the church in Barbados. So that the vestry, the chairman of the vestry, was the rector of the parish, and he was a very dominant figure at that time. The rector thereafter became a powerful force in the administration of the church and the vestry within his parish. It must be remembered that each parish had its particular vestry. Now, one of the earliest statutes of the vestries, dated August 1656, declared that all the freeholders of every parish within this island shall repair to their respective churches every year successively on the second Monday in January, and there, by their free voices, choose 16 persons to be the vestrymen of their parish for the ensuing year. So it was a yearly voting system where every year you would vote new members to the vestry. And the priest in charge of the parish church would automatically be the chairman. Campbell informs us that the work of the vestries was confined exclusively to the provision and maintenance of the churches and arrangement for the payment and proper maintenance of the ministers. So the vestry was particularly concerned in the early stages with church matters. In order to carry out these functions, at the first meeting of the vestrymen, they would appoint several committees, one of which was the Committee of Schools, and which later was renamed the Education Committee. Now, it is important that every vestry in January would appoint a series of committees, and the school committee was one of those. And that school committee evolved over time, and today we have the Ministry of Education. But it all started at that level of the Committee of Schools. And the vestry was deeply involved in the construction of schools and the slow but eventual unfolding of plans by the established church, the Anglicans, to further the cause of religious and moral education among the local black population. I always like to praise the Anglican Church. You see, Reverend Major's here. Because it is the church, the Anglican Church, that led the road towards the mass education of persons in Barbados. After slavery, it was the church, the Anglican Church, and others followed the Methodist and the Moravian that placed schools across this island. In fact, around 1890 to about 1910, Barbados had approximately 190 primary schools, so that you could leave your home and walk into school. My friend Lennox could walk from Thornbury Hill and straight to Christchurch Boys. I preferred Providence, and I just went through the back. I went to Providence. But, sorry? A better school? Yes. But in those days, the school was in the district. And nowadays, you have to catch a bus. Well, not everybody, but people know you have to catch a bus to go to primary school. So I like to always commend the Anglican Church, particularly for the spread of education in Barbados. The Committee of Schools generally comprised of two important persons, the rector and the warden, and two other vestrymen. So the school committee then was a powerful committee with the rector, chairman, and the warden. The warden was a very powerful fellow in local government at the time, and they're responsible for, those were the main members of this school committee. The committee was also responsible for providing salaries to headmasters and headmistresses of church schools and their appointments through diocesan funds at the disposal of the bishop. Now the bishop too at that time was a powerful political figure, and he had access to funds, and it's through the bishop that funds were passed on to several vestries where teachers were being paid and all that. In fact, at the first meeting of the Branch Association in 1826, the first bishop of Barbados, William Coleridge, informed those present that the British government had placed at his disposal £14,000 to be used throughout the diocese for the promotion of religion among the enslaved population. And the goal of the Branch Association at that time was to spread education among the slaves, the enslaved. It was, however, out of the Committee of Schools that saw the development of school supervision in Barbados. In the Vestry Minutes in St. George in 1778, a vivid description is given of the duties of the school committee, similar to an education officer in these days. It was to ensure that teachers of the several schools be required to keep registers of the names of the children, places of abode, and attendance at school. So that when I was a youngster at Providence, I used to see an old white guy, Reverend, I think he was later, visiting these schools. He's a Methodist, so Providence was a school. And I didn't realize what his real duty was. But he was there to visit the school occasionally to make sure that the attendances were well kept, that teachers performed their duties and all that. So it is this education committee headed by the director that ensured a standard of education across the country. Later, in the minutes of the St. George Vestry, again in 1840, it was mentioned in the yearly accounts that it was ordered that a sum of £50 currency be paid to the rector of the parish to meet the sum of £100 granted by the bishop for certain funds in his hands for payment of masters of several schools. So that the schools in those days, the teachers used to be paid by the officials from the clergy. And it's a story told by an old teacher. Some truth in it because I saw it in the Times paper, 1170-something, where if a teacher was given problems, perhaps he didn't attend church service or so, the reverend would pay him in 6-cent pieces. Because the priests in those days were not easy fellas, you know what I mean? Now, so the vestry system then was clearly responsible for development not only of the supervision of schools, but also the building of schools. They used their funds also for the building of schools and repairs of schools, and that continued right up into about the 1950s. Now, in secondary education, the vestry system also played a part in secondary education. Take foundation school. That was run by a board, and the vestry was all the vestry in these parishes were always careful that they send at least 2 trustees to sit on the secondary school boards. They made a point of that, and there was a lot of quarreling as to who should go and who shouldn't go. But eventually, every parish had at least 2 trustees on the boards of the early secondary education, foundation being one, and they helped in the management of those schools. There was a lot of discussion about the running of those schools at Vestry Minutes. Harrison Free School, which became Harrison College, there too, some vestrymen were also trustees of that school. The vestry system was also responsible for the amalgamation of the Perry and Coleridge schools. In fact, the Vestry was responsible mainly for the establishment of the Perry School. I won't bore you. It started as a normal primary school, and then it was upgraded and all that. But suffice it to say, it was established mainly by the Vestry. Another school that I will speak on is the St. Michael's School. Now, imagine that in the 1920s, Barbadians were very concerned about the education of their female children, the girls. The Queen's College was a secondary school for girls, but the middle-class blacks wanted a school also for their children. And the vestrymen of the St. Michael Vestry, they got together and protested and argued and demonstrated for this school for middle-class children. And it's amazing that in Barbados in 1928, a school, St. Michael School, was established for middle-class girls. And today, in the 21st century, we have, in some countries, Pakistan and other countries, that refuse to open up education for girls. Sometimes I wonder that these all men in the vestry of St. Michael Vestry were able to put together funds and to establish St. Michael's School in 1928. And today, in the 21st century, there are some countries and religious persons who refusing to allow the females free secondary education. But in Barbados, and I always applaud the Vestry system for being responsible for St. Michael's School. I see Dr. Mary's, who was a former principal there, smiling. But yeah, so the Vestry then was responsible, had some say in the development of secondary education and not only primary education.
Well, there you have it. Next week, as we continue to share the content of Dr. Dan Carter's latest book, we will learn of the role of the Vestry system in scholarship. This has been Our Heritage. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.